Welcome to the third in our fall webinar series from the CCD, focusing on different marketing topics and technological considerations for your small business. My name is Brett Wolf, and today we'll also be hearing from my colleague, Joshua Knight, who is, we both work with the Center for Crop Diversification. He's located in the horticulture department, and I'm in the ag economics department. And you can see down here, I'll just draw attention to these logos down at the bottom. These are all our partners on this webinar series. You'll hear from them at different points across the series. Last week, we talked with the Kentucky Horticulture Council as we discussed exploring new markets and new crops. The recording of that's now available on our website. Over the next 2 weeks after this, we'll hear from, we'll be speaking along with K-Card. If you're not familiar with K-Card, they're a great resource for our state. And specifically, these are the webinars that are left in our series. We have record keeping basics next week, thinking about off-season marketing and customer retention the week after that. And then the last one, just before Christmas, will be the thinking ahead to 2021 farmers market season, knowing what we know about COVID and where it's headed or not headed, and how can we prepare and evaluate. That'll be the third in that series. But next week, we're going to have record keeping basics. The first 3 weeks that we've covered, that was analytics. I mentioned the exploring new markets and crops. And then this week's, well, all the recordings of those are either available now or will be available later today. Quickly, I just want to say thank you to the USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. They provided funding for a project we put out called Marketing for All, and it served as the basis for a lot of this content that we've been putting out. And they worked with us through COVID, since we weren't able to travel, to finish out that project, to extend it and to pivot toward a little bit more online delivery and some other video programming that will be coming out before too long. Also, again, just want to give a shout out to all of our partners on this, and specifically recognize Emily Spencer in Savannah, Columbia, who work in the with me in the UK Extension Service, but specifically in the Agricultural Economics Department. So without much further ado, I'll just give you a little heads up on what things we're going to go over today. You'll hear from me on the brief overview, then we'll go over to Josh for a little bit, and then come back to me, and then we'll hop out into a browser and play around and just take a look at a couple of different options and what those might look like for you. So the first question I think I'd like to address is the question of, do you even need a website? Maybe what do you need it for if you do? I think that frequently in life, we look for technological solutions that we can buy to solve what is ultimately either not having enough time or not enough interest, or just the fact that we haven't necessarily exhausted some of the simple steps. You know, it's the equivalent, it's a lot simpler to go and buy a treadmill than it is to go out and walk around your neighborhood. And so if we're looking for a technological solution to a problem that we might be able to solve for free or with limited input, great. But before you build one, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of steps that you might consider to just make sure you're exhausting all of your options before you go down that path. We'll take a look at online stores. They're not necessarily just as straightforward and obvious and limited as they used to be. There's actually a lot of flexibility there. We'll then move on to this magical WYSIWYG platform. If you know what that is, you get bonus points now. We'll talk about it later. It's not as exciting as it sounds. And then we'll talk a little bit about some tools and design considerations for as you go forth and figure out what it is you're trying to do. You can structure, make some decisions around design and structure based on those tools. I'll briefly mention, some of you have already used the Q&A feature at the top. You can either use the Q&A or the chat function to drop questions in for me or for Josh, and we'll come back to those at the end. Thank you again for joining us, and let's go ahead and hop right in. So this first question that I ask is, do you need a website, or what is the purpose that you have for wanting your site? Are you trying to sell stuff online? Are you trying to build your brand? Are you trying to have a place with more information about yourself? Are you just trying to communicate what hours you're open, or the types of products you offer. Are you trying to accept orders online? What is the reasoning that you have for that? Because if the reason for it is just because somebody said that I should, or I feels like I should, that might not be the best reason to jump in and have a website from the get-go. Would I prefer that you have a lovely and wonderful cultivated online presence for your business with a site and all the social media and all those? Yes, I would. That would be great. But if you have limited time, limited interest, thinking, very strategically about, would it be, is it necessary, or is it something that I really need to achieve the purposes that I'm looking for? And is it something I need right now, or is it something maybe down the line? So before you build, I would highly recommend, if you haven't set up already, a Facebook page. This is a business page, and a Google business profile. If you haven't managed either of those yet, those are two quick steps that you can take. Frequently, you'll find that even if a business has a website, their Facebook page and their Google business profile will appear above it in the Google results or in the search engine results. The reason for that is that there's really powerful connections between these business profiles and Facebook profiles to that search engine. Again, both of these things, with the exception of the amount of time you put into them, are free as compared to a website where typically you're going to have to pay at least something for it. Sometimes you can get those for free too, though. You'll notice I have in red here, must mean that it's important. Updated, keep this updated. If you have a Facebook page and the last post was from May of 2017, it gives the impression that you're no longer open for business. It's the equivalent of the lights are always out in the building, or windows are broken out, or the hours sign on the door is so faded that you can't even see it anymore. The same way with a Google business profile. If you've had a change of address, if you've had a change of hours, if you've had any of those things, considering updating that and keeping it updated, because that's how it's valuable. There's a number of businesses that I patronize here in town, and I'll just show you this here in a few minutes after Josh talks, where I just look up their name just to see their hours. All I see is the Google business profile, and that my interaction with them online is over. And then I go to their business and I buy whatever it is, coffee shop or whatever it might be. So again, those two things, examples of free items that may serve the purpose of what you're looking for in a website. Low-tech pre-ordering options. If you're in the COVID era looking for ways to be able to offer pre-ordering through an online platform, we actually did a recorded webinar on this back in the spring. It was one of our more popular ones, offering, sorry, that's my dryer singing to me. The low-tech pre-ordering options webinar just covered ways to use integrated, phone calls, Google Forms, email, stuff like that, in order to collect pre-orders without having to go through the full process of setting up an online store. So those are just a couple of things I'll mention before you jump into building that you might want to consider. The last thing I have here, and it's something I'll cover again from a couple of different angles later, is that what is your enthusiasm or your budget for building a site? Because everybody wants nice things. Everybody wants a nice business, in this case, a business website. But do you have the enthusiasm and the interest to actually go through the process of building one? Because I wouldn't even offer this as a topic if I thought it was something that you could not eventually do. But there is going to be, I've built many, many websites across many different platforms, and I can say, in every single case, there's some times where I get stuck on how to do something and I need to go and Google it. So there is going to be a learning curve on that. But if you're enthusiastic, if you're interested and willing to learn and willing to do some research, it can be something that's totally in your wheelhouse, and it can save you a ton of money. That being said, if you don't have enthusiasm, I would highly consider paying someone to build it for you. I don't want this to come across as anti website builder companies or something like that. There are a number of the good ones out there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to focus on this Google business profile here for just a few minutes, because it's something that is really, really important, because it is the way that when people search for you online, the way that you appear to them. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh Knight.
Hi, everybody. Morning. So I'm Josh Knight. Like Brett said, I'm an extension in the horticulture department, but work for the Center for Crop Diversification. You might be wondering why somebody in horticulture is talking about information technology. But before my agricultural career, I used to work in information technology. So sometimes I am consulted on my experience with that to develop some resources, and that's what this is. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So why Google Business Profile? Uh, like Brett said, it's free. There should be kind of an asterisk there, just because there are services you can pay for within once you set up a Google Business Profile, mostly related to advertising. But Google is very good about, it's not going to try to trick you into spending money. It's all very obvious if you're trying to set up some kind of a premium service. Often they try to entice you with free advertising so you can see how it all works first before you actually get into that. But everything we're going to talk about today is free. It's actually a very limited portion of a Google Business Profile that involves any kind of fee for service. But so why Google?
Sorry.
Can No problem. Why Google? Google, like Brett illustrated a few moments ago when he referred to searching for something, or he referred to it as Googling for something. Um, Google holds 90% of the search engine market, and that's global. If people are looking for something online, really good chance they're going to use Google to look for it. It's just kind of the default. And another interesting statistic is about almost half, or 46%, of Google searches are for local businesses. So like Brett said, and I do this too, if I'm trying to figure out who's open when, um, one of my first stops is to just pull out my smartphone and look up the business and pull up information from their business profile that tells contact number, hours, and all those kind of things. And especially, I mean, Google jumped on it right away with sort of COVID restrictions, how that's changed some businesses. They have options for setting up, um, this is what our hours of operation are during COVID restrictions. So there's a lot of options in there that give potential customers good information about how to reach you and when. And another interesting statistic is about half of the businesses have not claimed their Google business listing. Um, so that it's unlikely. That tends to happen with really uh, highly urbanized locations where people report that a business is in a location, but the owner hasn't claimed the profile yet. But for kind of farm businesses and things like that, you're not going to see it. But it's just interesting to note that this is still very much untapped for businesses to use this resource. You can go ahead and go to the next one. So some negatives about this, which I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail, but the Google Business Profile is also linked with the Google Maps service. And if you set all that up, it makes your business location uh, known to the public, and it's something to consider. If you don't want to make yourself publicly available, then don't really set up that option. Um, but for the most part, businesses want people to know where they're located. And then there's also a time investment. It's very minimal compared to some of the other options that are gonna be discussed in this webinar. Probably equivalent to setting up like a Facebook profile for your business. I said 20 to 45 minutes, and most of that I would say isn't really even in the setting up process. It's more collecting some of the things that will make a really good business profile and having them handy before you get started. Things like promotional photos, um, digital copies of your company logo, things like that, contact information. Um, and then there's another time investment that's related to reviewer feedback, because once you have a Google Business Profile, people with Google accounts can leave comments about their experience with your business, which you will be notified of, and you can reply to them and reach out to them. That can be somewhat of a time investment, but honestly, it really seems to be with very very highly trafficked businesses, that have like hundreds of customers a day where you even start to see some of those. But you totally have the ability to give public feedback, um, or respond to that feedback and address any kind of issues you have with the client. And sometimes or more often than not, it's positive reviews, which can make your business look good, and give you kind of positive attention. Next slide. So before you start, some of those things I talked about having ready, you have to have your business name, and having a physical mailing address is also required, and definitely that's doubly true for having the Google Maps portion of this setup. Now, the other ones are listed as optional, but I strongly recommend having that information handy, or those resources handy, like promotional photos and your business logo. Having them nearby will make the process go so much quicker. Next slide. And so if you already have a Google account or a Gmail account, then you can create a business profile linked to it. I recommend creating a separate account, unless it's like if this is a personal account that you use. I recommend creating a separate one for your business services. It just makes uh, keeping things separate easier when you get emails that are kind of business related, business contact related from personal emails. But it's entirely up to you. There's not going to be any problem if you do that. So like I said, I recommend creating an additional account if you just have a personal one. And one of the things down at the bottom where it says the phone number for your account and your business contact number can be different. That's because when you create an account with Google, they want you to give them a contact phone number. Um, a cell phone number works really well, and that is primarily that initial phone number you provide them when you create your account isn't public. It's something that is for them to contact you if you're having problems accessing your account, like lose your password, need to reset it, or something like that. They can send you a text and guide you through that process. So that's what that means. That initial phone number when you create a new account isn't necessarily your public facing business number. Um, so creating accounts pretty straightforward. They just want a first, last name. You can put a business name in there if you like, and then creating a username and password, and then clicking next, and that's pretty much the process for creating a new account. Um, and then once you have that new account, or once you're logged into whatever account, whatever Google account you want to set up your business profile under, you go to that address, the google.com/business. And the first thing you're going to see is either one of those manage now buttons is what you want to click on. Um, Everything else, pretty much you can't really do anything else until you get that set up. Um, and then the very next page is where you're putting in your business name. Now, more than likely, your business already isn't going to have a profile you need to claim. That search window box is what that's for. So you'll more than likely just be clicking on the link below where it says add your business to Google. And that's where you type in your farm business name. And pretty much that's all you got to do on the screen, and click next. And then this next screen is kind of important because it wants you to choose a category for your business. And you only get to choose one. You can change it and add more categories later, but it's very important for the search feature to work best if you choose uh, one or multiple business categories that really fit what you do. And the list of existing categories is always expanding um, as people add different business types and things like that. So I've just included a list here of ones that I found from existing categories that are likely to apply to your business type. Um, but you want to really choose a category that fits best for what you do and what services you provide. and then you put that in there and click next. And then there's another interesting feature in here. If you have delivery services, you can set that up, and you can let them know that you offer delivery services. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide, but the main thing is that if you choose that, it takes you to this page and you get to choose areas. And you can add multiple entries into this. Like I put, for example, that one has Kentucky in there. So if you offer delivery statewide, you can do that. You can also do it by city. You can do it by county. So you can add kind of multiple locations to show what you service. And that's very helpful for when people are looking up your business. If they happen to fall in one of those locations, you're much more likely to have your business appear at the top. And this will also be relevant when people are looking at your business profile to see if you service them with deliveries. But like I said, this is only if you offer delivery services, but it's a nice feature to have in there. Next slide. And then verifying your location is important. Google's trying to make sure that you are who you say you are and that you have a um, physical address for your business. Um, but you will be able to create the rest of the profile before you verify your location, because it does take a few days. Um, I did this for the Center for Crop Diversification, and basically they just send you a postcard with a little code on it. Um, I think it's like 5 or 6 characters, something like that. And all you got to do is log back into your account when you get that, and there's a section for verifying. But this screen, you put the address and the name of the person you want to send that postcard to verify that you have control over a physical address. Next slide. Which actually, go ahead and go back. Sorry. If you don't want to do this, you can just click verify later and get into this later. And once you've done that, you've created your profile enough to be able to log into it, but they give you this recommendation for completing the listing for your business profile. This is where you can do things like add the hours, add your contact info, add a description. A description is maybe 2 or 3 sentences about what your business does. You can add your logo. There's a whole lot of things that you can get into here. As you can see on those categories over to the left, like posts have to do with things like kind of creating updates and things like that. You can see the reviews section. Insights refers to um, looking at information that has to do with who's searching for your business and who's finding it. Mostly what you're going to do when you get to the screen at first is go through and just complete the recommended listing information, because that'll set up your profile to be as functional more than likely as you need it to be. Everything else is just kind of additional bonus stuff. You can add more photos and things like that. And of course, you can always come back and update the information in here by going into the info section. But completing your listing is pretty quick and really allows you to get the most out of having a Google business profile. Next slide. And you can see here, this has to do with if you want to use the Google Maps feature and having that location available for people to find easily. It's under the information section, and there's the little icon. So I've got the red arrow there, but if you look at that little blue icon to the left of that address, that's kind of Google's symbol for like a map marker. And so that's where you would confirm the address. And below that is where you can adjust your service areas. So you can later say that you don't provide services to certain counties, or you're adding counties to your service area. All these things can be changed. So nothing's really set in stone. And you can even change the categories in there. Yeah, and I think that's all you really need to do to set up a Google business profile. It really doesn't take too long. Just have some pictures, your business name, and contact information, and you can set that up. And then when you search using Google for things related to the category of your business or your business, it shows up right away. And just one other thing I want to mention is that this can work instead of having a full website, but it can also work to complement a website if you have one, because you can absolutely add a link to your website on to your business profile, and you can add links to your Facebook profile, all those things. So um, you can either just have this as standalone or has this as a um, as kind of a group of, or as your just a part of your online presence for your business.
Yeah, it just, sorry, my mouse was having a little bit of a spasm there. But
No problem.
just to kind of hammer this home, I thought maybe we'll just go out into Google real quick. And so, like, for instance, let's say I'm looking for coffee in Lexington. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. These are the Google business profiles.
Correct. That's correct.
And so you can see here, it's, there's a little bit of a geo location, probably nearest to me, but also these ratings here that are listed. And these are, and according to what you're saying, these are partially managed by the business, assuming they have claimed it.
Right. Yes.
And so if I go back here real quick, getting listed toward the top, that's a whole nother conversation, but some of these pictures, let's see. So if I click on this, it's showing me, okay, it's showing me a website, it's showing me hours here.
Right.
And the main point that I have bringing up, I think we're both technically millennials, believe it or not. And I would say 90% of the time when I'm looking for something along these lines, whether I'm traveling or in town, this is the extent of my interaction with a business online. It could be that they have, let's see here, that they have a nice site here that I can go and visit, or I can, order online. But overall, I mean, and you can see there's maybe some issues here, but overall, that Google profile, and like, so let's say I have one of my favorite coffee shops in town. Let's see if they have, let's go back to the main, sorry. This here, this information here, am I correct in saying that what you were just talking about, Google business profile, this is where this information is managed?
Yep. All the photos up at the top, that's promotional photos they've added. They've completed their map profile, so it gives a little map target there, and then there's all the information as far as their address, their hours of operation, link to their website or menu. I mean, if you have certain types of businesses, like if you run a restaurant, they have specialized stuff for adding a menu, but contact number. And yeah, I mean, you can get a lot of information. People have left reviews on there. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to maybe take a look at well, it's not going to show me the mobile version. It would be even more important because it's up toward the top. This isn't a good example, but I just mainly wanted to just emphasize, like, what it is that we're talking about is that top result in a way, because Google's going to prioritize its own.
Right. Yeah. It's a great way to make your business prioritized within the Google search feature, is to have this business profile.
We had a comment that maybe the audio is breaking up. I'm not sure if that's happening for everybody. It's not happening for me. And so it's possible it could be internet on your end. I don't know, but we'll do the best we can, and hopefully it's clear. But the recording should be clear. Awesome. So if you have questions about the Google profile stuff, and I think we've emphasized why it's important, but feel free to drop them in the chat, and Josh can kind of keep an eye on those.
Sure.
And I'm going to jump back in and just talk about a couple of other options or angles on how you might think about this. So I have in quotes here, website builder, because in the old days, there was sort of the online store e-commerce component, and you had to plug that into a website somewhere else. Well, The old days being like 5 or 10 years ago. And so I wanted to mention, if your primary reason for being online is because you're interested in having an online store, that might just be the direction to go, because they're much more flexible than they used to be. It has a URL that you can send people to. Now, granted, it will, in most cases, especially the free ones, will have a branded component in the URL, in the web address. But it's targeted, it's fairly simple as far as the design considerations. And again, if you're just wanting to sell online, this might meet all of what you need, and even then some. And you can add it into a bigger website later or now if you want. And so you all know my style. Hopefully by now, I do like to go out and actually play around in the web browser so you can see what it looks like in real time. So this is a little dummy store that I created back in the spring, actually, but I've updated it now. And you could see what I mentioned, the URL being branded. So you could see it's not ccduky.com or .site, it's this .square.site. So Square is one of the biggest, maybe the biggest at this point, online retail point of sale and online store providers for small businesses. And if you've ever been to a place and they have the little white box that sticks out of the iPhone, or the little white box that holds the tablet or whatever, a lot of those are managed by this. But this is a website that I was able to create. And you can see up here, I have a home and an about, and I could have other items. I'll show you how to build that in a second. But this is what your customer would see. Down here, I have items that people can buy. I also have the option of having secondary pages where I have, different items. And the way that I build that is in a Square system like this. And I go in here to the website and I hit edit site. I did a whole webinar on how to set up an online store back in the spring. And some of the little notifications and the way that the menus are structured might be slightly different as compared to them, but I actually showed the process of building this whole site, and that recording is available again on the CCD website. But like you could see here, I have a home, I have an about page. So if we go to the about page, I have the option of telling my story. I can go and I can add additional pages if I want to have a contact page or a gallery image page. And all of this, with the exception of the transaction fees associated with when someone purchases, would be free. 100% free until somebody buys something, and then the percentage breakdowns, it's like 2.9% plus a quarter on most transactions or something along those lines. But it would allow you to take credit cards, it would allow you to offer things for sale online, and it allows pretty easy. So like, for instance, let's go to the about page. And I know the system and how it works because I played around with it pretty frequently. So that's part of the reason why I'm able to do this quickly. But you can add, if I wanted to add some additional images, for instance, I just hit that, I can add that, and then I can add it, done. I don't want to play around with that. And then over here, I can take and drag these things around to change the order if I want to, like that. So it's a lot of drag and drop stuff. Again, I've gone into this particular site builder pretty extensively, but my main point here is the same thing that you would go to create an online store that looks like this with items here. And people can go in on your store and they can click on this and they can buy a quart of broccoli, and you can do delivery or pickup or whatever. Add to cart. All that functionality is just built in. And again, this is from Square, just the Square company, powered by Square. And the main site address is this. But I also have the functionality of a website. I think this is probably a good option for most people, unless you're wanting to have a little bit more control over your brand, or you're not specifically looking for the online store e-commerce component built in. So that's the first item that I want to show you, is an online store is now much more than an online store. It's actually, it has the capacity to be built out into an entire website. The other thing I'll mention is that there are dedicated website builders. And this is that WYSIWYG thing that I was telling you about, which is what you see is what you get. And all that means is they took all the complex coding and they put that on the back end. So you don't have to learn the whole new language of coding. You get to interact with this thing as what I see when I build it is what I get when I publish the site out and people, get to experience it. It's basically the streamlined, putting the bumpers on the bowling lane for building websites, but it has come a long way and it's actually pretty darn polished now. There are both free and paid options for this. I will just note really quickly, a lot of the free options, it'll be like a branded site, kind of like what I just said with the Square sites. And so rather than www.your site, whatever your website is, abcfarms.com, if you choose to go the free route, you have to have www.abcfarms.weebly or .wix.com. Okay. Some sites, I think Squarespace is an example, unless they've changed very recently, there is no free option long term. You have a free 14-day period to play around and build a site, but if you want your site to be published on there, you have to pay. Whereas something like Weebly or WordPress, you could have a site on there for as long as they offer that program, but it will have their name in the URL. But so I would say the main reason I say that is if you go to Squarespace and you think you're going to be able to have a free site that looks great and you're going to be able to have abcfarms.squarespace.com forever, I'm pretty sure that's not the case anymore. And I think there's a couple of others that are like that. So just make sure that you are able to keep a free site forever and ever. I mentioned there's a lot of different platforms available. I have a couple of the most famous ones that have put a lot of time and energy into development and streamlining, no particular order: Wix, Weebly, Webs, Squarespace. Weebly now owns Square, which is different from Squarespace, just to confuse everything. But these are programs where you go and sign up and it'll generate an account for you, and then you go into the account and you can play around and build stuff. And I'll show you, I'm going to go and show you what it looks like inside one of the builders here in just a few minutes. Free trials, if there is, even if it's not free forever, it could be your friend. Like, some people really like the way that Squarespace options look as compared to some of the others. And that's part of the reason I think why it doesn't allow a free option forever. But I would just say, you're going to have to go and play around and see which one feels the most intuitive. I've used all of these, and I personally found Squarespace to be a little bit more complex, a little less intuitive for me personally. I found Weebly to be pretty simple to use. Webs, I think at the time it was kind of, I didn't care for some of their themes that were available, because that's part of it too, since they're taking some of the difficulty out by putting the bumpers on, they're also taking out some of the flexibility that you have creatively, but none of them are that limited now. And another thing I'll just say, when you see people advertise a certain price, so like, $100 a year or $150 a year, frequently the cost for an account, a builder account on the site, and the cost for having a domain name are separate. So you have to register for a domain name. You can do a lot of that internally. Like, they'll have a service where it's like anything else, that for convenience, they will say, well, you can sign up with us for an account with Weebly, and it's $100 a year. And you also have to register your domain, and that's $20 a year. And I'm making up these costs a little bit, but they're not super far out of the ballpark. You can usually get your domain cheaper if you get it somewhere else and then bring it into the builder. But it's just one thing as far as the sticker shock potential for sticker shock on the back end if you decide I want to have a website and I want it to have www.abcfarms.com, whatever your farm name is. You're going to have to pay for that domain name, and then you're going to have to pay for whatever your program you're using to develop it if you decide to go the route of these more streamlined web builders. Okay. Before we jump out and I show you just what this builder stuff looks like, I do want to just make a quick note that there are professionals who do this, and I'm not trying to undercut any of the web development companies or efforts that are out there at all. I think DIY approaches to everything are in some ways really good things. They empower people to be able to take creative agency in their own life and to develop things and learn new skills, and I think that's awesome. On the other hand, there's a reason that there are professional carpenters and professional tradespeople and professional web developers. It's because it takes time to develop that, and so having some patience to be able to learn the system, all of that factors in your decision on whether you want to go the route of trying to build this for yourself. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share just for 2 seconds while I get a few things set up, and then I'll come right back with it. And again, if you have questions or things coming up, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A section.
Just to piggyback on something Brett said about sticker shock and the purchasing of a domain name, something else to be aware of is that while you might get a first year at a discounted rate for a domain name like abcfarm.com, just kind of make sure to read the fine print and see what the second and third year are going to be. And it's not going to be anything much more than, $20 a year for just the name. It's just sometimes you can get a first year cost that's like $3 for the whole year, but then it'll bump up in year 2, and it's somewhat standard for domain name registration to be between $20 and $30 a year for having the something.com or .net or whatever it is you purchase.
Almost there. So I have 2 accounts and it won't let you manage them both from the same spot. So I had to log out and get a few things set up here. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen again. So now I'm in a Weebly web builder now. It looks very similar because they're owned by the same company. This is actually a now defunct woodworking business that once upon a time I operated. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of like how relatively easy it is to work with, I think, and just show you just the options of what things look like. So this was about building the brand a little bit, clarifying who I am, putting a face with a name, local business. I think that's an important thing. A little bit younger Brett in this picture. I then talk about my products here and some of the things that I at that point was developing, some of the furniture and things that I had made. I'm just giving you, and this was a page that was unpublished at that time, but here's some information that I was thinking about developing later on the back end. And so like, for instance, on this page, if I wanted to expand this in this particular builder, all I would have to do, if I wanted more text, all I would have to do is, again, I just grabbed it up here, grabbed this text thing up here and dragged it down. And then I can just edit whatever I want to edit. If I wanted to have, add a picture or, whatever, I just drag and drop it. I mean, it really is. And then if I want to add a picture, I can choose a picture from my computer, whatever. Let's see, I'll go ahead and do it. Go ahead and use the one from the webinar. It'll take a second to upload. But the bottom line is the limitation here, I don't think, is going to be the technology of the actual builder, because you can see it's relatively straightforward to do. Give me a second, and then here's this picture. And if I wanted to resize it, I could do that. Oop, not that small, maybe. So again, I'm not going to go super long on this, but you can add additional pages if you want. Here I have these listed. I just hit the plus page button. Let's say I want a blog page, because I'm going to do a blog, and it's going to generate. And then I can add posts. I mean, the internal dynamics of the particular builder that you choose to use are going to be different. Okay, so again, I've used pretty much all of them at this point. I think this one's super intuitive. I think some of the other ones are too. But the basics here of like how to put these things in place, I think you're just gonna kind of have to slowly figure them out gradually over time on your own. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention on this specifically. Josh I have had the experience of building websites for myself, but also for other people, including groups of other people, whether it be, a small neighborhood association, all the way to like a team of faculty who want to put together information about a particular project or a particular, set of topics. And I will just say, in my experience, the physical building of the site, especially when using something like this that's more streamlined, is actually a very, very small percentage of what happens. It's sort of like, I mean, here we are, on the eve of Thanksgiving. You think about like all of the prep work that goes in ahead of preparing a dish. And then, you got to bake it, or you got to cook it, or you got to do whatever. But the prep work, all of that prep work is what takes the majority of the time. The cooking part is just, is just part of it, and the cleanup too. But in the same way with the websites, the more that you can have, so I sat down with an outline of this. Okay, here's what I want to describe in my about page. Here's what I want to describe on, and then like on this part, I never got to developing this particular page. But I had these things sketched out. The other thing that I had, like if we go to furniture, for instance, again, this isn't the promo. I make stuff still, but not for selling to people. Having these pictures and having these, what we would call copy pulled together ahead of doing it will make your life so much easier as you start to build. And so that's why I say, when we start out, like think about what it is that you want the website for. Like, and I have this conversation with those teams of people that I built websites for. Why is it that you want this website? And in this case, I want to show you that I've done something. I have completed something that is interesting looking or whatever. That's part of the mission here. I want to educate people about why the products that I have may be a little bit more expensive. That's part of what I want my website to do. And so all that's to say that if you can go into this with a clear reason that you have the website, want to have the website, and all of the materials sorted, you will save yourself so much time and a lot of like, you won't have a website that's half built for 6 years. Just the simple, like these a couple of sentences of copy, they take a surprising amount of time to generate those. If you've ever tried to do that, just to kind of create out of nowhere these short little blurbs about these things, it actually, I mean, there's whole teams of people who are employed full time to write and edit copy for like large professional websites. And so I just say again, the more you can go in organized, the better off you'll be. Let's hop back over here real quick.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It honestly feels like it's kind of two different parts of your brain. And, on the one hand, if you can sit down and put together some basic, uh, just, consider what you want to, what information you want to have in text form and what pictures you want to have on your website, and put all those things together, so that you can start pulling from them when you're actually building the website. Because I don't know, it's kind of like it's like anything else, if somebody who's a painter, they go out and purchase canvas and stretch the canvas and do all this work, and then suddenly you're just sitting there, well, what am I going to paint? um, and so it can kind of feel the same way when you're building a website, because you start getting the hang of how to add text blocks and pictures, and then you're stuck until you know what pictures and what text you want listed in there. And so you can develop that. You should kind of have it's easier to develop ahead of time what you want on your website, and to kind of develop that separately, and then switch over to actually building the website, and you can just pull from it, and it goes a lot smoother than trying to sort of do it all at once. Though you can do that, you just might not be satisfied with it. Like, you'll kind of get stuck on certain parts, like Brett said, just putting together a couple of sentences in a text block, because something's supposed to be there, but you hadn't really thought about what you wanted to be in it until right then.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And because that blank page is a kind of a like the writer, the scariest thing to a writer is a blank piece of paper. Similarly, so and as you're making some of these decisions and you're thinking through it, I think spending a little bit of time thinking to yourself, talking with any of your business partners, or even talking with some of your customers, and being clear on what you want your brand to be, or what you think your brand is. If you are selling, using the paint, continuing with the painting, if you're selling high dollar artwork to collectors in Manhattan, you probably want a little more of a sleek, modern, minimalist look. If you're selling uh, homemade jams and jellies to the friendly family down the street, and they don't really get out to the country very often, maybe you have a little bit more of like an agricultural, rural aesthetic, a little more of a rustic vibe, or something a little bit more like that. And so all that is to say, like, I think thinking a little bit about what your business is, who your customers are, what the kinds of things that are that they like, and the messaging that you want to put out there, and letting that be the guide for the decisions that you make about what your website looks like. Because it's one thing to put together something that looks good, and that's a great thing. But if it doesn't reinforce what it is that you're trying to do, like if you had all in chrome and metal and real industrial look, and it turns out that you're selling like cut flowers, well, that doesn't really necessarily match up too well. So I'll just say that bigger consideration about what your brand is, what the values are that your customers have, what they associate with your brand, that's a bigger consideration. But as with all of these design decisions, that would be something I would think about. A couple of principles. I'll just say these are drawn from a longer presentation I gave on kind of very simple advertisement and graphic design, including some online tools back in the spring. Again, that's also available. I went in an in-depth demonstration of how to use this one free program called Canva, which if you've not used, it will probably change the way you do graphics. But thinking through what colors you're looking at. On that one that I put out there, it was this yellow and black and white, the Wolfwood site. It's very stark, very modern, very cool looking, at least I thought at the time. I'm not sure I would take it in that direction now, but that was what I decided. But thinking through some of the color combinations, there's a reason why all of the, not to go into the political realm, but all of the political signs, regardless of affiliation, seem to use red, white, and blue because of the associations with the United States, but also because that red and blue color scheme is very traditional and strong, and that's part of the reason why they do that. I have up here this umbrella. This umbrella happens to be laid out according to a color, like the color wheel. And so there's certain things like colors that are directly across from, this isn't an accurate color wheel, but colors that are directly across from each other can work well together. You know, we see Christmas here. We see like the Phoenix Suns colors is what I always think of here. Yellow and blue, these primary. So those types of pairings or something, as you play around with colors, and there's a couple of tools that I'll show you here. If you decide on a color, or if you have an existing logo with a color, there is a thing within graphic design where different colors have very specific codes associated with them. Sometimes you'll see this as RBG, which is red, blue, and green. CMKY, which is cyan, magenta, something, and yellow. And there's also hexadecimal. This just means that there's numbers that are associated with that color. So on RBG, it would, you'd see it, you know, it described as like 10, 28, 4. So the red value is 10, the blue value is 28, and the green value is 4. That color is going to be ideally going to be the same across all kinds of different places. So if all this is more than you're willing to think about, then don't worry about what I'm saying. But the point here is within website builders, within Canva, you can actually choose the exact color that's in your logo. So for instance, when I built this PowerPoint, this blue is literally the exact same blue as this, okay? And I did that because I know in this case, the RBG color code associated with the blue that's in the UK logo. If you ever worked for a big brand, you would know they are very serious about the colors, and UK has a very, I mean, they're not gonna come after me, but UK has a very specific color scheme that they use, and UK blue is a very particular color. It's the same way, just making notes of that. And so I have notes of what the color codes are for all the greens that are within the CCD logo. I have what the blues and greens are in Kentucky Proud, what the blue is in University of Kentucky, for that very reason. I'll just briefly hop out to the browser and show you these options. We're in the creative portion where my brain starts to go wild, but I think it's coolers. Yeah, this is a cool thing, even if you're just trying to pick out colors to go in your house or something. So what it will do is it will generate a color palette, things that it thinks go well together. If you're in the process of forming your brand or figuring out your logo or trying to think about color schemes for a website or for flyers or whatever, you can go in here, and you remember I just said, this is called the hexadecimal system, but you can also do RBG. See that color in RBG is 182771119. And so if you took that color to a graphic designer, they would know exactly what you were talking about. There's different options here too. So the way that you can, so let's say that's a color that we really like. If I hit the space bar, well, okay, let's say that this is a color that I really like. I'm gonna lock it. I want that one to stick around. And I'm gonna hit the space bar. Ooh, okay. I love the way these three colors look together. Let's lock these two. Hit that. Not a big fan of those. This is something different from what I would have picked, but I like this one. And let's pick one more color here. Oops. Ah, that looks nice. I love this color scheme. Actually, I don't like this one anymore. That's better. So the point here is, if you have certain colors that are in your color scheme that you like or within your logo, you can use those, use this to generate some things. Now, how do you know? So let's go to the Center for Crop Diversification real quick. I think I would know the website by now. So let's say I want my font, my text to match this lovely hemp leaf here. So there's actually a plugin. This is called the eyedropper. This is on Chrome. I'm sure they exist on other browsers too. Called the eyedropper tool. Eyedropper color picker. That's what it's called. And what it will allow me to do is have a little square here. And so it's actually where I have my mouse. And you see, as I hover over different parts with the tip of my mouse, it's showing me these different colors. And so let's say I really like this green here. So if I click on that, it's now selected that color, and it will give me, remember what we're talking about here, RBG 74 129 21. Here's a hexadecimal, which is another color. This is just a way to be able to match colors exactly for websites and for other, digital platforms. Okay, so if that's more than you're wanting to know about color, I'm sorry. One place that this kind of stuff can be used is in a thing called Canva, which is what I have here. And so I use Canva, which is a graphic design. Let's just go back here and build a quick. It's a graphic design thing you could use. Like this might be for a Facebook post or something like that. You can just take in and you can drag in different colors. This is all free. I have a whole thing showing how to use this, a whole recorded webinar. Let's see here, photos. So I have some different pictures, or let's see, uploads. If I wanted my logo to be, Kentucky Proud logo to be in there, and I want a picture of some chickens. Like that. That's not a very good picture, is it? So I use this for like for graphics in the past. This is a picture I found. And if I wanted to add some text, and let's just say for some strange reason, I really wanted this text to be that color of green from my website, I'd go up here, I would steal this hexadecimal thing, I'd go to the color, and I would say new color, and I would paste in the hexadecimal, and now this is hemp green for this particular color here. This Canva, again, Canva is a whole tool that can be used for web design. It can be used for generating Facebook cover pictures and all kinds of fun stuff. And I have a whole webinar about how to use Canva, but it's just one of those places you can use color codes to be able to do some design. Let's see here, Q&A. Yeah, Josh, would you mind? It's somewhere. I think it's on the CCD site. It's under webinars probably. It's also on the UK CCD YouTube page as well. And if you can't find it, I can find it here in just a minute. A couple other just considerations. Fonts is another thing that many of us swim in. We see things all the time. For instance, all of these fonts that I've been using have been this Avenir, because that's what UK asks us to use in all of our presentations, is this Avenir font. And it's been consistent across the whole thing. It's kind of, to me, it's modern without being threatening, is how I would describe this font. Oops, sorry. They're highly impactful. The only thing I would just say here is take a look at some fonts, pick one, and kind of stick with them. If your brand is kind of a fun and you're trying to sell stuff to young families or something like that, maybe you don't get the big kind of gothic diploma style text, If you're trying to sell to serious young professionals, maybe you don't use like a Papyrus or a Comic Sans. Those are obvious examples, but to me, if I'm trying to, like right now, I'm trying to give you a presentation on how to do web design and how to start thinking about those considerations, this font actually goes really well with that. It's clean, it's simple, it's somewhat modern, but without being too weird or edgy or hurting your eyes. So that's just something to think about. I'll just mention, I know I'm not a Canva brand rep, but if you are doing any designing within Canva, They have this thing called the Canva's Ultimate Guide to Font Pairing that is excellent. It shows you how to put multiple different fonts together from within their selection that look really, really nice. So again, I don't want to discourage you in any way. I know that I've thrown a lot of things out. I personally like to have examples and stuff just kind of quickly thrown to me so I can work on them later. But I would just encourage you to do everything you can as much for free first. That includes a Facebook page, your Google business profile, maybe an online store if that's the next step for you. But you don't always have to spend a bunch of money in order to be able to have an online presence. Let your brand guide your decisions, your design decisions, your decisions about whether or not you even have these things available, whether or not you do even do a website. I mean, if 90% of your interactions are in person at a farmer's market in cash, it might not be a huge part of your brand. There might not be that many people looking for you online. If you're trying to expand into people who do spend more time online, then maybe that is something you want to do. And if you are not enthusiastic, having been someone who started not really knowing how to do this and figuring it out, I am very enthusiastic about learning and problem solving and figuring things out. And it gets under my skin almost that if I can't quite figure out how to get this thing just right within a web builder or with whatever, if that is not you, and that's totally fine. We talk about this in marketing, knowing your strengths. If that's not you, I don't know. I think I would probably look to have someone do this for me. There are local web development companies that you can work with, in your town or in your region. Also, some of these website builder like sites like Weebly and Squarespace and all those, they offer a fee for service builder to be able to build stuff for you. I just saw one this morning. It was like you get paired with a builder on Weebly. I think it's for like $200 or something like that. Whether that's worth it to you, I don't know. It used to be that you couldn't begin to think about building a website for less than $5,000 for a lot of people who are developers. That's what they would charge. Now, I mean, it's just a different ballgame. And with that, on that note, professionals are professionals for a reason. So I'll pop out of here. I'm going to pull this back up and hopefully answer a few questions. Awesome. Great. Yeah, so Lori found the Canva link. I think it's a nice overview of sorts. Ooh. Let's see here. Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, if nobody else has any more questions, if you do, feel free to, you'll get an email you've already got an email from me this morning. You'll get another one from me here in a little bit with the recording. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful in getting you started. If you have questions or you just want to talk through things with someone, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. Thank you all very much for tuning in and have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you soon.